Is it, how do you pronounce your last name?
Keohane.
Oh, Keohane.
Yeah.
That's ironic.
Why?
Because it rhymes with cocaine.
Oh, yeah, no, boy. That's the first time I've ever heard
Oh,
that.
yeah, right? Edward Keohane. I was thinking, wow, I hope I can pronounce this. Not a problem.
That is true.
It's time for the SHAIR Recovery Podcast, where we bring you amazing life-changing success stories from addicts and alcoholics all over the world who share their inspiring journey in recovery. And now, here's your host,
Hey everybody, and welcome to another episode of TSP, the SHAIR Podcast. And today we have Ed Keohane joining us on the show. Today's episode, brace yourself because it's a roller coaster ride. As we get deep into this interview, you'll find that it's very emotionally charged. There's just a lot of information in there about the wreckage that this disease leaves behind and all the work that it takes to rebuild all those years of debauchery. This interview is one of my favorites. It's also the one where I myself am the most vulnerable. So prepare yourself, guys, because this one's a tearjerker. And again, I want to thank my good friend Ed, who has been an amazing supporter of the SHAIR Podcast since the beginning. It was really a cool thing to be able to be there for each other. So let's dive into Ed's story. But first, if you would like to know the best way to show your support for the SHAIR Podcast, here are a few ways you can help. First, go to www.theshairpodcast.com, and there you can sign up for our free newsletter, which will let you know every time a new episode of the SHAIR Podcast comes out. You can leave us a 5-star rating and review on iTunes or Stitcher Radio. If you would like to know other places that you can listen to the SHAIR Podcast, you can listen to us on iTunes, SoundCloud, Stitcher Radio, iHeartRadio, and YouTube. If you would like to donate to the SHAIR Podcast, you can do so via PayPal, or you can support us on Patreon. We have a thriving Facebook group that grows daily and has massive participation. Again, it's a private group, so if you would like to discuss recovery, share your experience, strength, and hope, help others, or lean on others for support, be sure to join the Facebook private group. And all of this information can be found on the website. So go to the website, and there you will find all the information that you need to help support the show. So now a quick message from our sponsors, and on to the show. Sober Nation is the largest online recovery community and treatment resource center. They provide treatment resources to those struggling with addiction, as well as to the family members who are caught in the crossfire. On top of that, Sober Nation is a huge community of good people who share their experience with each other. They have informative content, recovery and addiction news, as well as an entire clothing line which helps expand the culture of recovery. They can easily be found at www.sobernation.com. Sober Nation is putting recovery on the map. And finally, would you like to receive the most popular AA daily devotions free in one distribution? Transitions Daily delivers daily devotions from the 24 hours a day, AA Thought for the Day, Daily Reflections, Big Book Quote, Just for Today, As Bill Sees It, plus more. You can get our distribution daily via email, private Facebook group, or Twitter. Go to dailyaaemails.com for more information. And don't forget to share dailyaaemails.com with friends in meetings and with sponsees in recovery. Now back to the show. Hey Ed, thanks for joining us.
Hey, how you doing?
Doing awesome, buddy. How you feeling, man?
I'm good. It's a nice day in southern Missouri. The sun is out, and I'm talking to you, so all is well.
I'm pumped, dude. This is excellent. I love it. All right, folks, today we have Edward Keohane joining us on the SHAIR Podcast. Ed is very active in the private group, has been a longtime listener to the podcast, huge supporter, and he's got a hell of a story. So he reached out to me quite a few months back, and I'm finally getting him on the show. So, Ed, let's dive right in, buddy. You ready?
I'm ready to go when you are.
All right, let's do this, man. All right, so first, let's talk about what your daily routine looks like today, and then throw in how you maintain your recovery.
Well, my days are kind of backwards for most people. I work nights. I work for the post office, the United States Post Office. So I work nights, And so everything's kind of flip-flop. So how it usually begins is I get up after going to work all night after a few hours. I go to the gym. I go from the gym, and then I go to a meeting like 4 to 5 times a week. I come home, I just hang out. I do yard work, stuff like that, stuff to keep me busy. And then I recently bought a house, so my girlfriend and I, we are now cohabitants, and we have her son who's 4.5, and so I go pick him up from school. We hang out till his mom gets home. I usually try to catch a few more hours sleep, and then I go to work.
So tell us how you maintain your recovery then. Do you make lots of meetings? Do you have to go in the mornings? How does that look?
No, I usually catch my meetings at noon. There's a noon meeting that I go to in Springfield, Missouri, about 20 minutes away. I do that roughly 4 times a week. I have a sponsor who I speak with, several times a week. We work steps. I currently don't sponsor anyone else because I have a new improved recovery date, which we'll get to.
Right.
It's a lot of prayer at work, at night. I'm in my head a lot. I'm in my headphones a lot, which is when I listen to your show. So you're in my head a lot.
Nice.
That's kind of crazy to think about. But there's a lot of prayer, man, almost continuously, throughout the night and during the day, your will, not mine, be done, shit like that. And I really try to bring my recovery into every area of my life. I know some folks who drop that stuff at the door in terms of the meeting door. Man, I got to carry mine with me throughout the day in every area of my life. Otherwise, I just get lost. And then my recovery gets lost. And then I'm truly lost.
Yeah. It makes a big difference. Well, with that being said, do you have a daily practice, spiritual practice to maintain your conscious contact with a higher power?
In terms of actually sitting down and meditating, I didn't start doing that until, I don't know what episode of the Rule 62, but you guys were talking about meditation, and I think you had Michael Hilton and Stephanie on there, and you guys were talking about the Calm app for your phone, right?
Right.
So at that very time when I was listening to that, that was in January, I think, I was going through some turmoil in my recovery, and I thought, that's definitely a facet of my recovery that I'm missing. So I purchased that app, and man, I'm telling you what, like a good addict, I was doing that app like 2-3 times a day, listening to that shit, man. And you know what, though? It really helps. And so, formally, aside from my meetings and aside from all the components of my recovery, meditation I'm still an infant, but, it's become part of my daily practice.
Hey,
so I do the Calm app a lot.
It's never too early. It's never too late to start meditating. It's a one day at a time. It's just like anything else, right? One day at a time, you pick up these tools that are so necessary, and all of a sudden you realize that it's so beneficial. I do that. I try as much as possible to get up and do 20 minutes. Sometimes I have the Calm app on my phone too. I'll use that if there's too much chatter in my head. But most days I can sit for 20 minutes and just be silent, and then just ask God to guide me and to show me how to be of service just for today, right? Like just for today. Like that, in that moment when I'm meditating, it's just connecting to get me for the next 24 hours. And that way also it's the prelude and reminds me that, well, I got to do the same thing tomorrow. So I'm geared up and I got my HP behind me. So I love it. So let me ask you this. As you already mentioned, you have a new clean date. So what is your new clean date and how much time you have?
My new and improved sobriety date is January 14th of this year. I actually had like 3 relapses over the last 18 months, which, I'll get to. But before that, I had 4 years. And so HP, baby, you know. So you know what? It takes what it takes. And that last one, if that's what got me here, then that's what was needed. So no regrets.
No, of course not. Okay, so tell us about the first time you drank or used drugs. How old were you? And more importantly, how they made you feel?
The story that goes with that, which is a story I don't remember, is I was 5 and I won bingo. Like my family were all out playing bingo, and I won like $25. And my dad was like, hey, if you give me $5, I'll buy a 6-pack and I'll give you, a beer. And so that's how the story went. In reality, I think what happened was he drank almost all of the 1 can of beer and gave me a sip. And I think I pissed the bed that night. But I don't remember, any of this. That's just the story that kind of my family tells, and I believe it's true, but I don't remember that. And, in terms of my first actual drunk, I couldn't tell you. My first drink, I couldn't tell you. Now, my first time getting stoned, I can remember that, and I remember it well. I'm one of those people who I smoked pot like twice before I actually got stoned. And it wasn't because I didn't know how to smoke, because at the time I was smoking cigarettes, but it was probably some dirt, swag, just shitty weed, and probably took like a pinch hit or something and, act all stoned or something. But the first time I got stoned, a buddy of mine and I, it was right before a party. We were going to a college party. I think I was a sophomore in high school. And I just remember being baked and tripping. I remember falling upstairs because it was like a blind staircase leading up to this apartment party. This was in central Pennsylvania. And I just remember laughing my ass off. And I remember the two of us looking in the mirror and our eyes were so red, and I remember thinking, because I'd had health class and they talked about, drugs will do this and pot will do this. And I was looking in my eyes going, holy shit, man, they're right. My eyes are really red, But I remember just laughing hysterically, and I love to laugh. I still love to laugh. So that was my first time that I can remember being intoxicated.
Dude, this is, when I interview people, right, I forget sometimes the rhetoric behind smoking weed, and then it's like dirt weed, swag, pinch, baked. I'm sitting here just... I feel like I'm in one of those fucking 80s movies, you know what I mean? Half baked or something.
Oh, yeah.
Yeah. Oh, man, it never gets old. It never stops being funny unless, of course, you're actually baked.
Right. Yeah, then it's not so funny.
Now it's good. We can talk about it on this side of the fence. Too much. Ed, it's time for me to turn this show over to you, buddy. It's time for you to share the battle against drugs and alcohol, the wreckage it caused in your life, when you hit rock bottom, and finally, your journey up until recovery, up until today. So don't leave anything out, Ed. Take it away.
All right, thanks. So my name's Ed. I'm an alcoholic and I'm an addict.
Hey, Ed.
Hey, Ayo. And so I'm the youngest of 5 in a large Irish Catholic family. And usually when I give my story, I follow that up with, do I need to give any more explanation as to why I turned into an alcoholic, and everybody usually laughs because of the Irish tradition and being the youngest kid, but honest to God, there's no reason why I should have turned out the way that I did in terms of, being an addict and an alcoholic and all of the collateral consequences that came with that. So I was the youngest, and I'm the youngest by 5 years. My 4 siblings are all within a few years of each other. My eldest brother is Down syndrome, and then I have my next oldest brother. He actually passed. This year marks 10 years. He succumbed basically to the collateral consequences of drugs and alcohol.
Wow.
He had untreated hypertension, and anyway, he passed away. And then I have 2 older sisters whom I'm real tight with these days. We're all real tight. But we moved around. My dad was high level, government position with actually federal law enforcement, which may not sound too funny right now, but when I get later on in my story, it gets pretty funny. So we moved all around the country. We were basically like army brats. Every couple of years, my father would get a promotion, and we would, pull up the stakes, move the tents, and we'd move. And by move, I mean we would move like state to state and cross country. We wouldn't move like to the next town or something like that. I think all told, I moved either 12 or 13 times, up until graduating from high school. And as we moved, we would leave, like we moved from Memphis, Tennessee. We left my brother behind, and then we moved to central Pennsylvania and left my sisters behind there. And then we moved to Terre Haute, Indiana, and that's where I graduated high school from. And, my parents, my dad got another promotion in the middle of the middle of my senior year of high school. And, I threw the old guilt trip on him about, man, this is bullshit. And you moved me all around and here I am and I'm almost going to graduate high school. So long story short, they left me there. And man, I was so just immature.
Right.
I wouldn't say absolutely spoiled. We didn't want for anything, or we didn't need for anything,
right.
rather. I mean, there's plenty more I wanted, but as far as need, we didn't need for anything. And I played a lot of sports in high school. And my grades were pretty decent, so I didn't have to work or anything like that. They bought me a car when I was 16. So anyway, they moved in the middle of my senior year, and I had just turned 17. I was always the youngest kid in school because where I started school in New Jersey, you started when you were 4. So that probably added to my immaturity a little bit as well. But when they moved away, man, it was just on, I barely made it out of my senior year of high school. I mean, I skipped so many days when they left. In fact, I swear to God, the assistant principal, I remember him calling me, and I had been skipping last hour like all semester, my second semester of my senior year. And they finally caught me, with 2 weeks to go. And he just had to suspend me, through finals. And he hoped it, didn't impact my ability to graduate. And I was like, you know what, man, I was looking to get out of school these last 2 weeks. I already took all my finals. So, thanks a lot. And I, jammed out of school. But, it's just a real pattern of irresponsibility and unaccountability I was just laying down for myself. So, right out of high school, I moved in with a couple of friends of mine. And I started working at a pizza place. And I remember these people moved upstairs diagonal from us in this apartment building, and these are my first real run-ins with, they were 20-somethings, probably late 20s. And they used to always come down and use our phone, and I never understood why, other than the fact that they didn't have a phone.
Oh.
And then they would run, and they would go meet some people, and I didn't get it, And me and my buddies, we all, we drank and we smoked weed, and anyway, they turned out to be like crack addicts, so that was my first endeavor into the hard drugs was crack cocaine, and I had this pretty inquisitive mind. And I remember watching this, going into their apartment and seeing this rock, turn instantly to smoke. And I was like, what the fuck,
Yeah.
It's supposed to go from rock to liquid to smoke, but this was going straight to smoke, and I was super curious, and boy, that curiosity killed the cat. And I was hooked almost instantly. It was a train wreck. I dropped out at 2 semesters. I was enrolled at Indiana State University, and my life was just unraveling. It was really bad. So anyway, my friends, my high school friends, called my dad, who was a warden at a federal prison in California.
Oh.
And they said, Ed's in trouble, and Ed's, needs this, and he's doing this. And my dad, 2 days later, shows up, knocking on my apartment door. And I'm like, hey, what's going on, My room's just in shambles and just filthy. And, we up and moved to California that day, and when I tell my story, I always say, yeah, man, some of the good decisions I made is I moved from Indiana to California to get away from the drugs, and that's what I did. And I moved to California, and I quit smoking crack that day, but, on the doorstep was methamphetamine,
Man.
And here came the meth. So I lived in California for a year, and that really began my time of polysubstance abuse. We were going to San Francisco and buying acid at Haight-Ashbury, in the Deadhead District, and up all the time on meth. And so I lived in California, and that's what I was, I am and you about, is we used to go through San Luis all the time and Pismo Beach and, 5 cities, and loved that part of the country. But I mean, I was awake almost the entire year I lived in California.
Man. Yeah, hey, listeners, for those of you listening, the reason why it brings that up is because I used to live in San Luis Obispo for 10 years. So that's where the connection began. So go ahead, buddy.
Yeah, so then, it wasn't quite a year later, we moved to, or my parents, my dad got another promotion. We were moving to Springfield, Missouri, and they didn't know if I was going to go with them or not. They knew that I was using something, but they didn't really know what. And they knew they didn't want to leave me alone in California. So this girl at the time I was dating, she and we moved with my parents from California to Missouri. And I moved here to Missouri and realized what a market there was for methamphetamine. And so I began trafficking methamphetamine from California to Missouri. And, I remember I was probably 4 or 5 months deep in this thing. And I just remember, it was just, bringing in all kinds of money. And really what it was really just a great excuse to prolong my drug addiction and use whatever kind of drugs I wanted in whatever, manner I wanted. And along the way, I was on my way to California to purchase a large quantity of methamphetamine. And we got a hotel in Needles, California. And in a hotel room in Needles, California is the first time where I put a needle in my arm. And, it wasn't even planned. It wasn't even until later when I looked back and I thought, man, that's kind of ironic. I'm in Needles, California, and I'm putting needles in my arm.
I just got it now.
So yeah, I was a little slow on the uptake.
Yeah, right? All of a sudden I'm like, oh yeah.
But anyway, man, that was about a month before I got into trouble. And I remember thinking, man, I'm either going to get arrested or I'm going to die, because I was young and immature and had all kinds of money. And
hey, how long's the drive from California to Missouri?
It is exactly 24 hours.
Dude, so you have to stop how many times on the way?
You mean like overnight?
Yeah, or do you drive straight 24 hours?
Oh no, homie. I would drive straight through. I would meet this guy in a hotel casino in LA, and I would turn around and I would drive straight back. And so it was 2.5 days turnaround.
So you'd be smoking meth the whole time?
No, I'd get all jacked up, and there'd be no smoking on the road because you didn't want a bunch of paraphernalia on you. You didn't want the smell in the car, but I'd be high the whole time. Yeah, I'd drive there. Actually, on the way there, I'd be on the come down pretty much, because everything I brought back to market, I would sell, because the turnaround was like 4 times. I mean, in terms of the money.
Right. Now, when you stuck the needle in your arm for the first time, what were you shooting?
That was cocaine.
Oh, dude. And that's the first time you shot cocaine?
That was the first time I shot anything.
That must have just sent you to the moon.
Yeah, that was a train ride. This guy, I remember hearing this noise, and I said, "What is that noise?" And he said, "Here it comes." And man, it was a fucking train ride.
Oh, and wow.
It put me right. I mean, cocaine, I hear you guys on the show and other people that I've known talk about snorting cocaine, and it did this, and man, I got so high. Man, I never got high off snorting cocaine. Not after the first time smoking it and then, putting it in my arm. After that, putting it up my nose, that was a waste.
Right.
That was a real waste. But so anyway, after shooting cocaine, and then a month later, and I shot a lot of stuff that month. I did heroin the first time. It was just speedball and all kinds of crazy stuff. But I was on my way to California to pick up a large amount of methamphetamine, and I was arrested outside of Oklahoma City with, I think it was like $9,000, cocaine, pot, paraphernalia. I mean, it was like 4 or 5 different felonies.
Easily.
Yeah. And I was 19. And anyway, at that time, they had enough information to believe I was some type of drug dealer. So they faxed a warrant to Missouri. And I was growing pot in my apartment in Missouri at the time. Oh. So I got arrested on that. Got arrested on that stuff in Oklahoma. And then I got arrested on this stuff here in Missouri. I actually came back to Missouri and turned myself in because I bonded out in Oklahoma before they had enough time to put a warrant out for my arrest. But anyway, man, that a long legal battle. Well, it wasn't that long. 6 months, legal battle kind of ensued. It was like a two-front war. I had a thing going in Oklahoma. I had a thing going here. And how that all turned out was my dad actually went down with me to Oklahoma City. And like I said, he was a high-level government, official. And he was warden at the prison here in Springfield at the time. But he went down and he talked to the prosecutor. And I guess he just told him straight, man. I mean, my dad has intervened on my behalf many times, but he's never come in and lied about shit. He's come in and said, yeah, he's kind of a fuck up, And I don't know if my dad felt partially responsible or what, but anyway, he told this guy, I remember this guy, my dad was telling me this. He said, the prosecutor was asking, where are you going with all this money? And I told him, you were probably going to California to pick up more drugs. And I'm like, dude, fuck, man, don't tell him that. You're speculating. You don't even know if that's true. No, it was definitely true.
Of course.
Yeah, it was definitely true. But so anyway, what happens? This guy said, well, if you tell Ed to give up any interest in getting the money back, and we'll give him a 3-year deferred sentence, which basically meant don't come to Oklahoma for 3 years and don't get in any trouble in Oklahoma for 3 years, and we'll wipe it all away. So they did that. Here in Missouri, I wasn't quite so lucky. I pled guilty to possession of a controlled substance. There was a manufacturing charge and then a possession charge. So I got charged for growing the weed and then charged for having the weed that I was growing, basically. So I pled guilty, and on my 19th birthday, my 20th birthday, I was sentenced to 5 years of probation. Well, I'm an addict, and probation didn't work out for me. I didn't get straight. They gave me every chance in the book. I take full responsibility for my actions, and I ran into some good over my course of my criminal history. I've run into some real asshole cops just looking to screw somebody. I've run into some cops that probably let me get away with too much. But most of the cops that I ran into were good people just trying to do their jobs.
Right.
You know what I mean?
That's good.
And that's basically what most of these POs were. They were just trying to do their job. I did have one guy who really fucked me around, but that's another story. I don't hold any resentments there anymore. But
dude,
anyway.
When you listen to all the shit you've done before your 21st birthday, you're like, well, no hard feelings.
I'm a live and let live kind of guy.
Yeah, right?
Yeah. But anyway, so as I said, they gave me every chance and I blew every chance. So I was sentenced on my 20th birthday to 5 years of probation. On my 25th birthday, I arrived in prison to start my 5-year sentence. So I effectively served 5 years of probation to the day and then got convicted and sent to prison.
Good Lord.
So in that time, though, I did have to go serve a 120. And what a 120 is, that's a euphemism for 120 days. And what you do is you go into the Missouri Department of Corrections for 120 days. My 120-day, I had to do a treatment. So I was an inpatient, in-prison treatment center. And that was an 84-day program. But anyway, so I did that, but when I got out, I was still on probation. They still gave me one more chance. Well, I blew that too. So finally, on my 25th birthday, 5 years later to the day, I was convicted to 5 years in prison, and I had to go start my sentence. So I did about 3 years total. So I didn't do hard time, but the time I did was hard enough. I'll tell you that, Today I go and I talk to guys in prison, and, there's some cats that have been in there 15, 20 years, and they're looking at me going, 3 years, that ain't shit. And I'm like, well, that's true, but, that's a long time. I don't care who you are. 3 years is a long time.
Buddy, a week's too long for me.
That first night's the longest, but yeah, no, I hear you. Any of it's too long, But so anyway, how my prison went was I'd go in, And I'd follow the rules, and then I'd get out because Missouri prisons are just completely overcrowded. And but I'd get out and I'd hit the streets, and I'd be in, and I'd think, you know what, I'm gonna get out, and I'm gonna do different, and I'm gonna do different. I really believed it, and my parents believed it, and everybody believed it. Man, I'd get out, it wouldn't take long at all, and I'm doing the same stuff. And it's untreated addiction, alcoholism, right? I'm not getting any treatment or anything on the inside, and when I get out, it's right back to where I was. I'm picking up right where I left off, and so I got out. This is probably I think this was the fourth time I'd gotten out, and aforementioned parole officer, who was a douchebag, I go into his office, and I'm reading upside the week before I'd come in, and I had UA'd for him, giving him a urinalysis, and I had pissed dirty. And so anyway, I go in and I look down and I see he's got my name written, and it says something like put a warrant out for him or something. And he comes back in the office, and I said, "Hey man," I said, "are you having me arrested?" And he goes, "Ed, I got to do it." And I said, "Not today." And I ran from the parole's office.
What?
Yeah, and I remember him. I'll never forget these words. He said, "Don't make this harder on yourself," and I fucking ran, got in my car, whoop, I was gone, and I was real high at the time, and, I got a couple blocks away, I was getting ready to get on the highway, and here come a police car up behind me, he pulls me over, and this guy gets out, and this dude's pretty big, like weight-wise, he's got some girth to him, and I'm thinking, oh, I can outrun this dude. I'm going to get this guy. I'm going to get out of here. So this guy comes up. He pulls me up out of the car, and he's being real cool and put your hands on the hood, and that's when I ran. I said, poof, and I ran. And I got about 3 steps, and this guy was on me. And he was a lot faster than he looked for being a big old boy. And when he tackled me, he broke his leg. Oh. And so I got passed out. I got choked out, right? I got choked out by this guy. I don't blame him. I'd have choked my ass out too.
Heck yeah.
Yeah. And so anyway, I'm coming to, and as I'm coming to, I'm getting drugged. And I'm getting run up one side, down the other by this sergeant or whoever the high officer on staff or on that, shift was. Cause he's like, "Do you know what you just did to my officer? And you did this and you did that. And you're going to prison for this," and I believed everything he was telling me, and I was like, oh my God, I just fucked my life up. That little petty dope charge I've been doing time on, that's nothing compared to what I just did to myself. And anyway, I'm getting drugged to the car, and I look up and I see this female officer, right? And I had this flash of memory of her pulling up onto the scene right before everything went down, and she had a real just kind of spacey look on her face, and I said, "Hey, do you know that guy?" And she just nodded her head yes at me, and I said, "Man, tell that guy I'm sorry," and later on during disclosure, she came through, and she really kind of saved me from having to do more time than I did on it. But anyway, man, I got thrown in the back of the cop car, and I'd thought about killing myself before, and I'd even had a half-hearted attempt at taking a bunch of Xanax after doing a bunch of speed, thinking that would kill me. And, I later realized after researching that probably wouldn't do anything. And it didn't. It just passed me out for a while. But, when they put me in the back of that cop car, man, I just went totally selfish on myself. And by that, I mean, I was just like, you know what? I'm done with this. I want a do-over. I don't want to be here anymore. And, it's weird because I was able to shut down that rational side of myself, that side of myself, which in the past had talked me out of doing something stupid like that. And I just shut it down. And so they took me to the holding facility, to the jail, the county jail here in Missouri. And I'm sitting there, man, I prayed all night. And I even tried to hang myself on my cell that night, but the way they build cells these days, you can't hardly do that. And anyway, I heard them say, "Are we going to hand out razors tonight?" And, I heard because I was right across from booking, so I heard all of the conversation going on amongst the officers. And the guy said, "No, there's too much going on. We'll do it in the morning. We'll do it in the morning." So I prayed all night, I prayed all night that, I really thought I was going to die in the morning. And I really thought that I was going to like see my grandmother and see these other dead relatives. And I really thought, and I still believe that I don't believe in hell, I believe in life after death. And so anyway, the next morning they handed out razors and, this was like probably the worst day of my life. Looking back, this was a pretty bad day. I was being held on a DOC warrant, meaning I'd already been convicted of, I was on parole. So I'd already had one felony. And then I've been arrested and I'm being charged with all these other felonies from breaking that cop's leg. And then I'm in a jail cell and I'm getting ready to break open a razor, which is another felony because it's dangerous contraband. It's construed as a weapon. And so I said, man, if I break this razor open, I got to go through with it. And so I did. And I broke the razor open and I cut my throat and I sliced my throat in two places. And, I hit my jugular. I didn't sever it, but I nicked it and I severed all these other veins. And man, if you ever seen the movies where people get their throat cut and they're dead, that's fucking bullshit. Because I was alive. I was alive and I was angry. I was angry at Hollywood for having lied to me for all of these years,
Dude.
And so...
Were you bleeding all over the place?
Oh, yeah, dude. It was like a rooster tail.
Dude.
And I'm catching out of my peripheral vision. And so I'm alive and I'm pissed, And so I go on I cut my arms, right across the crooks of my elbows and I sever all the veins, and I cut myself so deep that first I started, on my left arm with my right hand because I'm right-handed. And then when I went to cut my right arm with my left hand, all I could operate was my thumb because I had cut my tendons and my nerves. And so I wasn't able to operate the rest of my hand. And so I sat there and I was fully severed, at the elbows. And I remember just pumping my fists, trying to get all the life out of me. And I'm looking through the door and I'm hoping nobody sees me, And so anyway, the next thing I know, there's this cop and I come to and he's sitting on my chest and he's got his hands around my throat. And I'm thinking, this fucking guy's trying to kill me.
Right.
And then I kind of realize what's going on.
Yeah.
And I get to looking around the cells and, man, there's all these cops, 4 or 5 of them, 6 of them, drenched in my blood. And you know what? Oh, not one of those cops had gloves on. And I am sexually active. I got tattoo. I have a tattoo, and I'm a needle user. And they know this. And they're saving my life. And they don't have any gloves on, And anyway, so obviously I didn't die.
No, dude.
Right? They held me together.
Oh my God.
I got into the hospital and they stitched me back up, put me together. So then I came to, and I was under, watch in the hospital, meaning I had like a police escort there the whole time for like 3-4 days, got out of ICU. And then I went directly to a psych ward. And I stayed there for like 6 or 7 weeks. And that's when I really got into hardcore, psychotropic meds and Seroquel and all this kind of crazy stuff. And I woke up one day in the psych ward and I laid my head down that night in prison. So I went back to prison. What eventually happened with that was the second officer on the scene, the lady who I had mentioned, in her discovery, she explained exactly what had happened. I had a good lawyer. I didn't have a good lawyer. Mommy and Daddy got me a good lawyer. And I ended up getting a 2-year Class D felony for resisting arrest. And, real quick, I'll tell you that I ran into that guy who was sitting on my chest holding me together. I ran into him later on, about a year later, in prison. He was training to be a correctional officer, and I went up to him, and boy, he knew my name. He said, Mr. Keohane. And I said, officer, I don't even remember his name, but I said, hey, man, I said, I just want to tell you thank you. He said, you know what, I'm going to tell you something real quick. He said, we've had one other guy ever try that in that Christian County jail. He said, and the day you did that, after you left in the ambulance, I was there cleaning up your blood, and here this guy come being arrested on like a DUI or something. He said, and I looked at him and I said, don't even think about it, and it was just weird, the sequence of events and everything that happened, if you stacked, the odds on all that, it's just astronomical, and now being sober, I look back and I see my higher power's hand and all that.
Oh, yeah.
But anyway, man, that was in 2004. I got released from prison in 2006. It's a decade ago to this month right now that I've been incarceration free. I'd love to say that I got out and got sober and stayed sober. I did not. I got out in 2006. For a long time I was on probation and parole, and I never pissed dirty for anything except for pot, because I would quit everything else, before I got to my PO, but the pot always, it hung with me. And so I just couldn't wait to be free from probation and parole so I could smoke my weed. That was my problem. It was these fucking cops messing with me. Just let me smoke my weed. So I got out June 28th of 2006, and I was able to finally smoke my weed, man, and not worry about piss tests or any of that other stuff. And it was great, for like 2 months, man. 2 months, it was great. And then I woke up one day and I was like, what the fuck, man? I can't believe that I basically went and did all this time in prison and all this kind of crazy stuff just to smoke weed. And now here I am, and it's not nearly as exciting as I was hoping it would be. And, at that point, I still didn't quit using drugs. I tried getting in the military. At that point, they were accepting, people with nonviolent felonies like mine. As it turns out, because of my attempted suicide, they didn't want to put a gun in my hand, for whatever reason.
Shocker.
Yeah, I know. So I was going to defend my country. Well, whatever. They didn't want me doing that. So I wasn't able to get in the military. I tried getting in the electrical union in St. Louis because I'm an electrician, a residential electrician. And that's right when the housing market crashed. So that dried up. It just seemed like everywhere I turned, man, it just, this option wasn't working. This option wasn't working. So I moved back to Southwest Missouri, and, I got really heavily involved with Oxycontin, hillbilly heroin. And I went and lived with this lady who was a legitimate like millionaire. Like her dad held these patents for this stuff in like Detroit. He was a genius. He worked with the automotive industry. And anyway, she held all these rights to this stuff. And anyway, all we do, man, is she would buy like 5 or 6 people's prescriptions of Oxycontin every month, and we just lay around and do Oxycontin, and snort Xanax and
dude.
Yeah, that was like my last hardcore run was an Oxycontin run for about 5 months, I'd say. And then one day, I know from your show that you had never had any experience with that, but I was using a needle with the Oxycontin, and some of the highest milligrams you can get are 80 milligrams. Well, I did 2 of them at once, dude. And I was high for about 2 minutes, and then I wasn't high. And at that point, I realized, oh my God, I am so strung on these things. And the ensuing withdrawal and cold turkey from those things was bad. It was 2 weeks of no sleep. All you want to do is sleep. Body hurts. You do anything to get another high, I can see why people rob pharmacies and stuff like that. I mean, just the relief that you want from feeling this way, it was bad. And anyway, I did, though. I was able to cold turkey. She actually got arrested, which is why we had to cold turkey. She got arrested, and so she had to cold turkey. So we cold turkeyed for 2 weeks, and then I got out of there. And I moved back with my parents, and I said, I won't do no more drugs. Drugs are my problem. Drugs this, drugs that. Can I move back home? I'm going to start going to school. And they were like, yeah, just come home. So I went home, and I became an alcoholic. I mean, I became worse of an alcoholic than I was a needle using junkie. It took about a year and a half. I destroyed my pancreas. I can't produce insulin anymore. So I'm a type 1 diabetic, although it's, they say it's unclassified. I don't really know what that means. All I know is all of a sudden my pancreas quit working. So now I'm a type 1 diabetic, but a good year and a half of drinking, that's what did it for me. At the end, I was drinking, like a half gallon of vodka a day, and I'm living in my parents' basement, and I have a son who I haven't mentioned in all this. He's now 13. I wasn't a father to him. His mother had moved him to Phoenix, Arizona in the midst of all my turmoil and bull crap.
Yeah, for sure.
She didn't want him around.
No.
She didn't want him to see me like that. And so anyway, I'm living in my parents' basement. I got a kid I'm not being a father to. I'm unemployable, right? I don't have a car. I don't have a license. I've got 3 DUIs. I just skimmed right over that, There's just too much criminal history to go into. Just
seriously.
3 little fucking DUIs. Let's not even talk about that shit. Let's just go to the felonies and the good stuff. But I got 3 DUIs, so drunk. I'm going to college, barely making it through college. I'm going to this little community college here. And so my last drink was, it was September 30th of 2010, and I was on campus. I was drunk on campus. I was found by the security officer. He brought me into the dean's office, and the dean, who later I got to be pretty good buddies with, he's passed away now. His name was Dr. Steve Bierman. That guy saved my life. But anyway, I'm in there, and the cops were there, and the paramedics were there, and the paramedics were like, Ed, we got to take you to the hospital. And I look at him, and I'm hammered, but I do remember this. I was like, dude, look, I don't have any money to go to the hospital. And so the cop stepped up. The cop goes, well, Ed, I'm going to have to take you to jail. And I looked at that cop, and I said, well, you know what? Then I guess we're going to the hospital. And so they took me to the hospital, and that was it, man. I woke up in the hospital, and I looked around, and there was like a car wreck that had come in while I was passed out and coming to, and broken leg, and people are yelling, and there's real trauma going on, and I'm in there because I'm drunk at school. Right. I'm like 33 years old. I'm living in my parents' basement. I got a kid I don't pay child support for. I don't have a job. I don't have a car. Unemployable. My parents are just about to kick me out. I had said in the beginning of the show I had a brother who passed away. He had died basically of this disease, and they just couldn't sit by and watch me die. So I was just about homeless, And to be honest, I thought throughout periods of my sobriety or my youth that if I was ever going to get sober, I was going to have to be homeless. I was going to have hit that bottom of a low to come to. If I were ever able to come to, I was really going to have to feel some bad consequences, because I'd been to prison. I'd tried killing myself. I'd been to an institution, all of the, jails, institutions, and death.
Yeah.
I'd done it all, kissed death. Hadn't died, obviously, and nothing had gotten me sober. And that day, laying in the hospital, man, I was just like, this is just fucked up. And so it was about 3 days later, I went to an AA meeting, because at the end, alcohol was my master. And, I got a sponsor. I'm not going to say that the first meeting I thought, oh, this is it, I'm home. That wasn't it at all. Nobody goes to AA on a winning, right? But I did feel a little better. And I felt a little better because I was able to look my parents. I was able to look my other loved ones in the eyes. And I was able to honestly say, I'm trying to do the right thing here. I'm actually trying to get better. And I'd never been trying to get better. I've been maybe trying to look like I was getting better just so everybody would leave me alone and I could get loaded in peace. But for the first time, I was trying to do something different, And I got this guy, and it was actually his dad, who's not even in recovery. He recently said at a meeting, which his dad said to him, that if you want something you've never had, you got to be willing to do something you've never done.
Yeah.
And, and that's exactly what I was doing, and so I got a sponsor. I went through the steps. I had the spiritual awakening, kind of the educational variety. But real quick, I'll just touch on that. It was the day after it was the day of doing my fifth step with my sponsor. I went home, and like it suggests out of the AA book, I meditated for an hour, reviewed my step work, and then I took my sixth and my seventh step right then. And I was laying on the couch, and all of a sudden, my mind was just blank, right? And it was weird, and it felt unnerving. And so immediately I started conjuring up just some fucking thought, some schemes to get my head going again. And then I just kind of let it sit in a minute again, and it was calm. And it was serenity. And I never had that. It was quiet. My head was quiet. They talk about when I was out using, I never wanted anybody to know what was really going on in my head, because at any point in time, I was thinking, I want to be more fucked up, And I knew that was crazy to be thinking like that, but that's how I always thought. And for the first time, man, I didn't need to be fucked up. And I couldn't remember, right? I couldn't remember the last time I had been thinking about using or wanting to use or drink. And it could have been an hour, it could have been a day, it could have been a week. I don't know. The point is that I lost track, and I wasn't obsessing about using. And man, that had never happened. I used to have some friends, and we all thought we were pretty smart. We'd sit around and thinking about, we need to get sober, and we'd be all fucked up or whatever. Man, I tried thinking my way out of it. I even tried using my way out of it. Like, I thought that maybe if I got so high, I would scare myself into going, we can never do that again. We almost died. No, that didn't work either. Nothing worked. Nothing ever came close to working. And after a few months of programming and working the steps with a sponsor, that obsession was gone. And I was sold. I was sold on the program, from then. And so anyway, that was in 2010, and I had 4 years of good recovery. I graduated. I said I was almost dropped out of school, man. I graduated. I got my associates. Then I got my bachelor's, and then I went and I got my master's in applied anthropology. I ended up studying ex-offenders who, get out of prison, and recidivism and desistance, what sends people back versus what keeps people out. And then it's funny because employment is really connected to recidivism, and that's a big thing. It's a big bar for successful reentry. A lot of people getting out with criminal convictions are having a hard time finding work, and I get it. I'm not saying that let's give all the convicts jobs. There's some of us, man, who have really flipped it around. And who went out and gotten the letters behind our name, or some of us haven't, but we're just trying really hard to do the right thing. And man, when you get kicked over and over and over again, and you're trying to do the right thing, you're trying to pull yourself up by your bootstraps, eventually, man, it takes a toll. It takes a toll, and I'll tell you, man, I've relapsed. I had relapsed 3 times, like I said, over the last 18 months. And at the time, I didn't think I'm going to relapse. At the time, I was just irritated because a lot of people in my graduate program were finding employment, and I wasn't. And that was really just wearing on me. And I wasn't talking to my sponsor about it. And I wasn't talking to my sponsor about it because I would sit in meetings and I'd hear people talk about real problems. And I would think, man, these are this little sissy shit that I'm, complaining about. Oh, I can't get a job. That's really bullshit. Well, anyway, I didn't share it. And eventually I relapsed on it.
Yeah.
And, and I did that a couple of times. But anyway, and then so today, I got a new sponsor. Not that my old sponsor wasn't doing anything right. It's just I wasn't seeing it very often. So I got a new sponsor, which keeps me more accountable. And so today, man, I work at the post office. I do all this recovery. I sit on the board of a nonprofit called Reentry and Resources, where we help ex-offenders getting out of incarceration to get their identification. To you and I, that doesn't sound like a big deal, but when you get out, you have no money, no job. You don't have a birth certificate. You can't get a social security card. You can't get a license. I mean, it becomes like a catch-22, this cycle of I can't get this and I can't get that, so we intervene on that. And I also sit on the labor board of the NAACP here locally, where they kind of use my research on ex-offender employability to promote ban the box legislation here in town. And then just most recently, and this is, God really coming in, is that same college I told you about that I got drunk at and, had to go to the hospital from. They asked me to come back as a teacher and teach anthropology there. And then the other college, the Missouri State University, where I got my BS and my MS from, they too have reached out and said, we want you to come teach for us as well. So,
wow.
HP, baby.
HP, baby. Oh, yeah. My God.
Yeah.
Dude, yeah. I'm exhausted. Yeah. Fuck. Dude, I feel like I watched, I feel like I did the like right after the movie Flight, fucking exhausted, dude. It was so, wow, yeah. Man. Like, this has got to be one of the wildest stories I have heard. Man, you jam so much in an hour, and there's so much more. And man, I thank you, man. Thank you for sharing your truth, because that was that was hardcore, man. That's truth and then some. I really don't know where to begin, man. I'm dumbfounded by what you've been through and what this disease is capable of taking someone down to, whittling them down to nothing. It's unfathomable.
Everybody's got their line of something they won't do, and it's almost like slippery soap principle. You do something a little bad, and then the next time, that's not so bad. And then maybe you do something a little bit more bad, and a little bit more bad, and a little bit more bad. And then that line, which you once would not have crossed for anything, you fucking turn around and you've crossed that thing, 10 actions ago. And it is, man. It I'm not going to blame anybody for my addiction or anything. I did it. Those are my choices. I put myself in those positions. I did. I don't blame anybody. But it is fucked up where it will take you, man.
Dude,
it's crazy. I was listening to Katrina King last night, and she was talking about nobody grows up wanting to be an addict or an alcoholic or smelling like jail. When she said that, I was laughing my ass off. So I was like, no shit, people don't get that, you stink in jail. But it's true, man. You're not sitting up in school in the third grade talking about, I want to be a needle-using junkie who breaks cops' legs, who lies and steals from his parents and everybody else around him just because he wants to feel better, But, man, that's what happens. All of a sudden you look around and it's like, oh, my God. And for me, man, it's like, what have I become? Oh, shit, I don't want to think about that. We need to use more so I don't have to think about that, and go commit more debauchery. So,
well, I don't think that it has anything to do with, like you said, we're not making conscious decisions. We're almost, how do I put this? I need to put blame where it needs to go, right? Like, for example, I own all my actions just like you do. Every decision I made, I hold myself accountable for all the consequences that I had to face. But at the same time, there is that facet of it, that acknowledgement. And just like Katrina's story yesterday, that acknowledgement that this is a disease, that this is not a moral failing, and that, like many of us, when the lines we said we'd never cross, by the time we get to the other side, you realize you've crossed all these lines, and it was almost as though you never even thought about it. Like, The last time you thought about it is when you said, I'd never do that. And then in the middle of it, it never even, that thought never crosses your mind, right? Oh man, I said I'd never do this.
Exactly.
And you're already too deep into it, man. And there's so much about your story that needs to be heard, that needs to be told, that people need to connect with. Your son, I'm gonna out myself here right now. I've got a 20-year-old son I've never seen,
Really? Yeah, man. I feel you.
And, it's I've never talked about this on a podcast. And my 13-year-old daughter, I've given her everything I have. I got sober when I got clean, she was born, and she was my lifeline, right? Mm-hmm. I forced myself to, her mother told me, "You've lost me, and you're not getting me back, but you got a shot here. So you need to get clean for your daughter, or I will take her from you, and you will never see her again." And all I could think of was just flashing back to a life of a child who doesn't have a father. Who the last time I saw him, he was 1 year old, and knowing what you went through and what you were going through, that touched me, man. Because if I start to think about all the things that the disease has come between me and X, it's the last thing on my list of amends and regret and shame that I live with, and the only people I talk with too are like, I'll share about it in a meeting, I'll talk to my sponsor, and I'll talk to my wife about it, but I keep it close to the hip, man. I keep it close to the hip because it's something that it brings a lot of shame and regret into my life, and I know that today what I'm doing and what you're doing and how we are affecting other people's lives by actively participating not only in our own recovery but in the recovery of others. We have to do this. We have an obligation to help those before us who are so lost, who are in so much pain, who are so consumed by this horrible disease, that if we don't, share our truths, we come out of from behind the veil of anonymity and share our story and our truth, the changes that we have seen happen up until now wouldn't have happened, man.
Right.
Who's to say we'd be here right now even having this conversation if we hadn't put ourselves out there into the public and embraced, what is out there for us, the positive, the recovery, the love, the HP, God, everything. We have to connect with it on every possible level that you can. Whether it's in the Facebook group, whether it's on this podcast, whether it's going to meetings, whether it's going to jails, whether it's teaching at schools, it's had its hands around your neck for so long. And I stare at this picture of you on your Skype, and at first I saw the scar on your neck and wondered, if that was like an old tattoo or something. And as soon as you got into your story about being in jail, and I went, oh my God, that's what that scar is from, man.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. It was a bad day, man. Bad day.
A lot of bad days, brother. A lot of bad days. But so listen, man. I feel like I just time warped, and I'm gonna pull myself back in here.
That's all. I think that's awesome, man. That's cool.
Thank you, Ed. Thank you for being there for me, and wow, your story has just so impacted me right now in this moment. Lot going through my mind.
I'll tell you real quick, just to so two things. My son, right, 5 months after getting sober, his mother, out of the blue, called from Arizona, and she said, "I'm ready to bring Jonas back." And I said, okay, and I didn't make any promises or nothing, but And since she's been back, now he's 13. He just had his 13th birthday. He doesn't know that side of me. He knows of it. That was something else where he had been back about a year, and I had asked his mom, I said, look, man, I don't want this kid growing up and then finding out all this stuff about me, then having to reevaluate his opinion of me when he's, 12, 15, 20 years old. I said, I just want to come true and tell him everything. And she said, just do it. And I did. And that's just had an amazing impact on our relationship. And now I consider myself to be his ambassador to truth. I always tell him that because I'm like this anthropologist, this weird social scientist person with all this chemical background and all this shit. And I tell him everything. I'm talking prostitutes, sex, drugs, all of it, And the one thing his mother and I tell him a lot is that, people will use drugs habitually, obviously because they like the way it feels. But, we go further than that. And what is that? That's because people don't like the way they feel normally. And hopefully, if we're bringing up our child separately, his mother and I are good friends, but we each have our own significant other. If we bring him up to feel good about himself and to nurture and foster him where he needs to be and to punish him where he needs to be, we're hoping that if you bring somebody up and they feel good enough normally, then they won't seek out drugs and alcohol to make themselves feel better. And that's something that we really strive towards. And then the other thing which you touched on about outing ourselves, it was a month ago, I delivered a talk on recidivism at my graduate work to this criminal justice panel at Missouri State University. And anyway, I got interviewed, and I got my freaking picture on the front page of the local newspaper with my criminal history and my drug abuse history, like front page, And I was just laughing to myself thinking, man, what are the odds of that? 6 years ago, you'd have told me, and it was a good thing, that my name was going to be in the paper, my picture was going to be in the paper, and I just would have said you're nuts, But anyway, man, HP, baby, HP.
It is, man. And it's these success stories, they are so beneficial, so helpful, so needed. There's, the outpouring of love and support that I get from the listeners, especially like I got so many messages yesterday from Katrina's story. It was so powerful. People really connected with it, regardless of, whether or not you've gone through the hell that you and Katrina have gone through. It's still 100% relatable, and the yets of where this could take me if I don't arrest this development, this behavior, this part of me that I have to embrace, and I have to accept that there's a part of me that is vulnerable, that is connected to a disease, that is a disease, and that untreated, I'm just a walking time bomb. It's just a matter of time before I am back, doing God knows what, man.
Absolutely.
And now you've got 5 months, and you're working at the post office, and you're speaking at schools, and you're being invited.
Yeah, that's the trip, eh?
What do you think is different this time from all the other times?
You know what, man? I won't say that I was on a pink cloud for 4 years, but I had 4 great years of recovery. I mean, I had some stuff go on. There was some death. There was relationships failed and all that kind of stuff. But, I really thought that I was going to get these letters behind my name, right? These degrees, right? And that was going to somehow wipe away my felonious past in the eyes of potential employers, which would then put me in some type of monetary success, right? And when that didn't happen, I felt like I had just been led down this path, and then all of a sudden, the fucking rug was pulled out from under me, right? So I had to really reevaluate what is important to me. What do I have to do in order to feel successful? Like my own ideas of personal success. And also I had to figure out that no matter how small something is in my head, I got to get that shit out. Because if I don't, it will fester. And I can tell you that each time I'd relapse, the thought, to relapse or whatever, was months in advance before the actual relapse. And it didn't start with, I'm going to get fucked up. It started with, God, that pisses me off. Or something like that, right? It wasn't that big of a deal. And I didn't share, whether my ego was in the way or whatever it was. For whatever reason, I didn't share what was going on in my head. And eventually, it ate me up. And then all of a sudden, it didn't sound like such a bad idea. And so this time I would say that in terms of, I've really kind of reevaluated what success means to me. And I've also, like I said, I have a new sponsor that I share whatever's going on in my head. If I don't share it at a meeting because perhaps it's not meeting appropriate, then I call him and I talk to him about it, no matter how trivial, all of it. I'm not willing to take the chance anymore. Maybe somewhere along the way, I put something else in front of my recovery. If you'd have asked me, I would have said, no, I'm not. But which wolf was I feeding, right? I was feeding one of them, and it was a recovery. And at the time, I didn't know it. I thought I was doing God's will and all that kind of crazy shit. Today, I share what's going on in my head, no matter what.
That's so powerful, man. It's all just this horrible, horrific poison that is just running through our veins until we open our mouths. The minute you speak your truth, the venom is released, and we don't identify with that. So many of us don't identify with that because you start to justify and rationalize why somebody else wouldn't be interested in you sharing your truth.
Totally.
And that's just the disease telling you don't want to share that. Nobody's interested in that. That's petty bullshit.
Absolutely.
And you have to crush that itty bitty shitty committee that fucking runs rampant in your head. And it is, dude.
I've never heard that. I'm using that. The itty bitty shitty committee recently reported.
Dude. And yeah, absolutely. And the thing is, at first, just like you talk about, it's real subtle.
Yeah.
Okay? And then it gets louder, and it gets louder, and it gets louder, and then you're using.
Yep.
Because that's how you drown it out, right? Instead of going, dude, I'm hearing voices, man.
We've been going here for a while, and I know that I'll share this real quick. My last relapse, man, January 13th, heroin sounded like a good idea. And I've only done heroin twice before in my life. I relapsed for less than 24 hours, and then I woke up in the ER. I had went out the night before on an OD, and I was in the shower all night for 8 hours. My girlfriend, who's an RN at a treatment center, found me the next day, and she stayed with me, and she didn't resuscitate me. The paramedics did, but yeah, they came in, man, and then I woke up in the hospital. I'm like, what the fuck happened, And I guess I had some tainted heroin. They said it was cut with fentanyl, and there was a lot of bad heroin, or by bad, I mean super good heroin go around. But the trip about it was, like, my parents came in, and they're seeing me at the ER and stuff. And for a while, everybody non-program in my life who found out, who knew about it, none of them believed I wasn't using, that I hadn't been using,
right?
Because none of them understand.
Right.
It's a drink, it's a shot of heroin, it's whatever. It's the same to me. I'm an addict and I'm an alcoholic. Anything to make me feel different. But yeah, that last relapse, man, that one had some consequences. You asked what was different. That was another thing, man. This last relapse. The two before were real short, I got danced out there, and I came right back into recovery less than a week later. Paid no consequences. This one, I almost lost my life. So that's something else that's different, man. Is that I almost died.
Dude, your parents, seriously, my God, the roller coaster that they have been, and they're not addicts.
No.
So they don't get it, man. They just got to watch one of their sons die from it, and another one, spend years, whether or not that was going to happen or not. And wow,
our relationship today is stellar. My folks and I, man, it's fantastic. That's one of the greatest things about my recovery. But anyway, that's for a different time.
Yeah. Okay, well, let's start shutting down here, man, because seriously, we could deviate into that real quick.
Yeah, there's a lot of shit. A lot of shit.
All right, I'm going to ask you the closing questions that
Sure.
We share for our newcomers. And the first one is always, what was keeping you from getting clean or staying clean when you first got introduced to recovery?
I always had another idea. Of control. You know, in the big book, there's 7 words, man, and they're the most impactful 7 words, and they describe me so well. And it's in that part where they're talking about control, and it says, take a trip or not take a trip. You know, like I had run out of ideas on how to use and control it. And I don't know if you want to call that my ego or what, but I always had another plan.
Yeah.
And at the end, the plans were all done. I had exhausted every idea I had, and I had no more ideas. And I guess I had just hurt enough. I'd finally hurt enough. I'd finally, you know, I talk to people and I say that, you know, when the pain and the sorrow or whatever that you're using over, when the pain and sorrow that the using causes becomes greater than that pain, then that's when, you know, you're lost. And that's where I was at, man. The pain from using was greater than the pain that using was covering up.
Yes, absolutely. It's such a beautiful saying, you'll stop when the pain of continuing is greater than the pain of change, then you'll finally start your journey. It's 100% true.
Yep.
So, number 2, at what point did you have that spiritual awakening, that aha moment inside of recovery when you accepted that you were powerless over drugs and alcohol for the first time, but had developed the hope that you could now recover?
You know, I'll tell you that that's when I was laying on the couch, when I had told you before about the day of doing my 5th step with my sponsor. And, my life had been getting a little bit better. I'd been feeling a little bit better. But when I couldn't remember when the last time I had been obsessed, right? That obsession of drinking or doing drugs or feeling different. When I couldn't remember the last time I had thought about that, when that happened, I was totally sold on this sobriety shit. all the weirdos in the rooms, everything they said, it was all fucking true. And I was like, shit, man. And, I got a friend named Sarah, and we talk about it. She's like, this shit's like voodoo magic. And I'm like, no shit, it is, And I would have never gotten to experience it had I not just kept on going on, kept trying to do it, kept doing it, even though I didn't understand the shit I was having to do. My sponsor was like, just do it, your mind will catch up. Do it, your mind will catch up. He was exactly right. I started feeling better, and then all of a sudden, when I looked around and I realized things were better, I couldn't deny it anymore. Things were better because of, a higher power that I had found through the 12 steps of Alcoholics Anonymous.
Dude, that's powerful, bro.
Oh, down, man.
I love it, man. The voodoo.
Voodoo magic, baby. Voodoo magic.
It's true, man. I don't know how it works, why it works, none of it. I have no explanation to why it does. I just know it does work. So I just do what I'm told.
Yep, me too.
So number 3, do you have a favorite book you would recommend to a newcomer you read in early recovery?
For the last several years, because I was a grad student and before I was working at Missouri State, people would ask me, so what do you read these days? I'd be like, what, I'm a grad student. I don't have time to read for pleasure, And what I found out since being a grad student is I just really don't like reading that much. So I'm going to stick with the tried but true, the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous.
It saved so many lives.
Describes me to a T, man. I read through that. It's totally undeniable that I am an alcoholic. I'm an addict too, but it doesn't matter. For me, it's the same program one way or the other. So the big book of Alcoholics Anonymous is the book that I would recommend.
Alcohol is a drug, brother.
Yep.
It's all the same.
Yep.
All right. So what is the best suggestion you have ever received?
Leave no stone unturned. That, to give that some context, that came from the mouth of my first sponsor when I was working through my 4-step. And, people say, oh, God, the 4-step, this and that. Oh, it's so bad. We're talking about, he said, start with your worst first, meaning put down the one thing you don't want to tell nobody. Put that thing down first, and then the rest of it ain't shit compared to the first one. He said, and then just don't leave anything out. He's like, if you put enough energy into thinking about something and justifying, should I put it down? Should I not put it down? Just put it down. Put it down. We'll talk about it. Boom. Done. Leave no stone unturned. Leave nothing to chance. You will increase your chances of staying sober by talking about all of it.
I love it. So number 5, if you could give our newcomers only one suggestion, what would that be?
Leave no stone unturned.
Yeah.
I mean, that represents so much more than what I just said, but that buddy of mine I was talking about earlier, whose father told him, if you want something you've never had, you got to be willing to do something you've never done.
Mm-hmm.
And all of those things ring true. I guess it's, they both kind of encapsulate the whole give it your all, give it your all, try your hardest for, 3 months. If your life doesn't change, you can go back to that shit. It's waiting for you.
Yeah, 90 and 90. At the end of those 90 days, we'd gladly refund your misery.
That's exactly right. In fact, you're going to probably get twice the amount of misery if you go back out. So, yeah, man, I believe that.
All these cliches, man. I always say this. They're like, good stuff, oh. I go, look, man, I just regurgitate to the best of my ability. Nothing's original here.
That's right, man. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants, man. None of these thoughts are mine.
Yeah, I like that.
Yeah,
I like it. I'm standing on the shoulders of giants. Wow, that might be the title of your show.
There you go, man.
Standing on the shoulders of giants. I love it.
Yeah.
Boom. Ed, man, let's give another big HP baby.
HP baby. HP baby.
This was just this knocked my socks off, bro. I got pretty vulnerable on this one, man, and
you did.
Yeah,
you did.
Thank you.
I'm really glad that you were. Isn't that weird how shit like that just happens sometimes? All of a sudden, the floodgates open, and you're like, "Fuck it,
dude." That's exactly what just happened. I just couldn't hold it in anymore, man. I got this life that everybody sees, and I'm married, and I have this amazing family, and my beautiful daughter's 13 years old, and I got this podcast, and at 13 years clean and sober, and I can just list my gratitude is just huge. And then there's this facet of my life where I just miss my son so much.
Yeah, man.
And I love him, and there isn't a day that doesn't go by and a year that doesn't go by where I don't think about him, and his birthday is 2 days away from my daughter's. That's another crazy one. It's crazy, dude. It's just crazy, and
yeah, it is.
If he, if you hear this recording someday, Jordan, and it's just me, your dad, telling you I love you. So it's wild, man. It's wild. So here we are, you and me, man, doing this thing.
Here we are, baby.
All right. So, wow, folks, we have now reached the end of this unbelievable episode. Thanks for joining us. And as we say here in Costa Rica, pura vida.
Pura vida.
Thank you for joining us on the SHAIR Recovery Podcast. To check out the show notes page on this interview or to thank our guests for sharing their story, go to www.theshairpodcast.com. While you're on the website, don't forget to sign up for our free newsletter to stay up to date on the latest news, podcasts, and interviews. Want to be one of our guests and share your story? Then go to our website and click on the Share Your Story button. We share our inspiring recovery stories every Tuesday, so subscribe to our show on iTunes or Stitcher Radio to get your free weekly download. We'll see you then. The opinions shared on this show reflect those of the individual speaker and not of any 12-Step Fellowship as a